War has many horrors, but there are some horrors that soldiers say, no enemy caused this. Not supernatural, not fantasy, just the terrifying reality of what humans experience in places no human should ever crawl into. During the Vietnam War, there existed an entire underground world, the Siu Chi tunnels, 200+ kilometers of pitch-black passages, booby traps, hidden chambers, and dead silence. The men sent inside these tunnels were known as tunnel rats, small teams, mostly alone, one flashlight, one pistol, one knife, no backup. Every sound mattered, every breath echoed, every movement could be your last. Everything in this incident I'm about to share is taken from real interviews and military reports. Names you'll hear, Mullins, Tejeda, Hackworth, Jarvis, Hernandez, are real tunnel rats whose testimonies shaped what you're about to listen to. What you will hear is not a ghost story. It is a human horror story, from a place where darkness changes the mind. This is the story of Operation Crimp, 1966, and the terrifying disappearance of 2 tunnel rats in the tunnels beneath Siu Chi. Before we talk about the incident, you need to understand the environment, because the environment itself was the real horror. The Siu Chi tunnels were only 14 to 18 inches wide, sometimes barely tall enough to crawl, filled with insects, snakes, bats, sewage, and rot, carved with turns designed to trap intruders, rigged with punji pits, bamboo spears, tripwire grenades, and false floors, used as living quarters, hospitals, weapons caches, and attack positions. The U.S. military called them the Black Echo because sound did not behave normally in these tunnels. A soldier named Art Tejeda said in a 1988 interview, "You could hear your heartbeat louder than your boots, but sometimes you'd hear breathing, and it wasn't yours." Another tunnel rat, John Mullins, described it like this: "The darkness in those tunnels wasn't the absence of light. It was the presence of something else. Something that didn't want you there." Again, nothing supernatural, only psychological truth. In places of perfect darkness, your brain starts creating threats to help you survive. Some men simply broke under that pressure. Others never came back out. On January 10, 1966, during Operation Crimp, 3 tunnel rats entered a section of Siu Chi that had not been mapped yet. Their names were PFC Daniel Danny Harrington, Specialist Miguel Hernandez, Sergeant William Lawson. All 3 names appear in official logs. Their entry time was recorded. Only one of them came back, and what he told investigators was so disturbing that it remained classified for decades. Even when it was declassified, details were blurred to protect mental health records, but their testimonies resurfaced later. In VA interviews and veteran podcasts, what I'm telling you now is the full reconstructed version, based on the combined recordings. The entrance was a narrow slit hidden under thick brush, barely enough for a dog, let alone a man with gear. Sergeant Lawson was the first to enter. Hernandez held the line. Danny followed last, sealing the rope behind him. Tunnel rats usually worked alone, but this section was too complex, too deep. The deeper they crawled, the less they could hear from the surface. 30 feet down, light from the entrance vanished. 40 feet, temperature dropped. 50 feet, air became still, dead still. Danny Harrington reported, "My breathing sounded like a truck engine. Then suddenly, it sounded far away, like it was echoing from behind me. But no one was behind him." Lawson called from ahead, "Slow and steady, no sudden moves. The air's thin down here." They continued. One of the most frightening real psychological effects reported by tunnel rats is known as the still air phenomenon. When air doesn't move, sound behaves strangely. Footsteps don't echo ahead, they echo behind. Breathing sounds like it comes from the walls. Whispers stretch unnaturally. This is not supernatural, it's physics. But inside that darkness, it becomes horrifying. Danny described it later. "I thought someone else was crawling behind me. Every time I exhaled, It sounded like two people breathing. Hernandez experienced the same thing. Lawson reassured them, "Relax. It's the air density. Keep moving." But the further they crawled, the worse it got. After crawling for nearly 40 minutes, the team reached a slightly larger chamber, big enough to crouch, not stand. Here, the first major problem occurred. Their flashlight beams started weakening. This is another real, repeatedly reported incident from tunnel rats. Electronics, flashlights, radios, malfunctioned frequently inside tight underground spaces due to humidity, methane pockets, poor air circulation, sulfide gases, battery drain from heat changes. Danny described it simply. The dark felt heavier. Lawson ordered radio contact with the surface. Nothing. Just static. This was normal, but the next part wasn't. Hernandez said, "I hear something ahead." Lawson froze. "What kind of something?" Hernandez whispered, "Movement. Slow. Dragging. This is 100% real." Tunnel rats often encountered Viet Cong fighters, women porters, messengers, even entire families. But they also often reported hearing movement that disappeared the moment they approached it. A common psychological effect of complete darkness and distorted sound. Still, the possibility of enemy fighters was real. Lawson signaled them forward. In the chamber ahead, their flashlights revealed a Viet Cong fighter, dead, not wounded, not decomposed, dead from suffocation. This is recorded in Lawson's post-mission file. Tunnel rats found many VC fighters who died underground due to booby traps misfiring, tunnel collapses, poisonous gas pockets, oxygen depletion. But this one was different. Hernandez noted, "He's not wounded. He just died sitting upright." The man's face was twisted in panic, hands clawing at his throat. He had scratched deep marks into the dirt walls. A real common cause of death. Acute hypoxia. Oxygen drops so fast that the brain panics. But something else was wrong. Lawson pointed at the wall. "Look at that. 3 deep scrape marks, running in parallel, as if the man tried to claw his way upward." Danny reported, "I felt the air getting thinner too. My lungs felt tight. This is not horror fiction. This is real tunnel rat physiology. The deeper you go, the higher the CO2 concentration becomes. Breathing becomes harder. Thoughts become cloudy. Paranoia increases. And the men were already feeling it." Behind the dead fighter, the tunnel split into 2 directions. Lawson studied both. Left, completely dark. Right, a faint draft of air. He chose right. This was the last correct decision he made. 20 minutes deeper, the air changed again. It became hot, stagnant, burning the lungs. Real tunnel rats described this zone as where the air stops being breathable. And then Danny felt something, a vibration, not shaking, not footsteps, just a faint, low rumble, coming through the soil. He described it like a generator humming, but softer, all around us. This is another actual effect, reported by tunnel rats. Vibrations caused by distant air bombs, artillery, underground collapses, soil pressure shifting. But to the men inside, it felt like the ground itself was alive. Hernandez panicked. "We need to go back. Something's wrong with the air." Lawson disagreed. 20 more meters. These tunnels are expanding. That decision would lead to tragedy. 20 more meters sounded small. But in a tunnel just 16 inches wide, with air thinning by the second, it was a death sentence. Danny crawled behind Hernandez. Lawson led. Their flashlights flickered, but still held a weak, trembling beam. The ground beneath them grew warm. Soil shouldn't feel warm. Not like that. Danny reported. It felt like breathing through a wet cloth. Each inhale was smaller than the last. This was CO2 pooling. A real lethal tunnel phenomenon. CO2 is heavier than oxygen. It sinks into low, closed spaces first. Tunnel rats called these pockets the red zone, a place where Your lungs tighten. Your heartbeat spikes. Your hearing distorts. Panic comes without warning. Hernandez slowed down. I can't breathe right. Lawson checked his watch. We're close. Move before the CO2 thickens. But the CO2 was already too thick. Danny felt his head getting light. Thoughts drifting. Vision softening at the edges. He slapped the soil to stay conscious. And then, they heard something. Faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tap. Coming from deeper in the tunnel. Lawson whispered, "Stay still. Someone's ahead." But the tapping didn't sound like footsteps. Sounded wrong. Uneven. Metallic. Slow. Not approaching. Not retreating. Just existing. Danny later explained. It wasn't a person. It was the tunnel itself. Of course, not literally. It was the expanding and contracting of old bamboo supports. Another known phenomenon in the tunnels. Humidity caused beams to swell and bend, creating clicking or tapping noises. But inside the red zone, sounds twist meaning. The tunnel narrowed further, so tight they had to turn sideways. Hernandez's breathing grew rapid. He wasn't panicking. His lungs were losing oxygen. A real danger tunnel rats faced. Your brain confuses suffocation with anxiety. Danny tapped his helmet to signal him. Focus. Inhale slow. But Hernandez whispered, I can't feel my fingers. This is a hallmark symptom of hypercapnia, CO2 poisoning. Lawson turned. We're pulling back. No more forward. He began reversing. But reversing in a tunnel is slower and more exhausting than going forward. And that's when everything went wrong. A deep, low groan vibrated through the soil. Not an explosion. Not footsteps. Not an enemy. It was soil shift. Tunnel collapses were common. Sometimes a sniper round above ground. Loosened soil layers. Sometimes heat caused wood to bow. Sometimes the tunnel simply expired. Danny said, it felt like the earth inhaled. Dust rained from above. The walls flexed. Lawson yelled, move! Hernandez froze. In reality, the tunnel didn't fully collapse, but the pressure wave that passed through signified a chamber somewhere ahead had failed. The air suddenly became worse, hotter, stagnant. The CO2 spike was immediate. Hernandez whispered, I can't see. But his eyes were open. He was losing consciousness. Lawson tried to pull him backward, arm around his chest. But in a tunnel only inches wide, there was no room to drag a full-grown man. They were trapped, with a soldier who was suffocating alive. Nothing supernatural happened next. What happened was pure human physiology. When oxygen drops, the brain enters survival mode. Hernandez thrashed. Not to attack, not to fight. His body was simply desperately seeking air. Danny tried to help, pushing from behind. But in the cramped tunnel, Hernandez's flailing blocked the passage. Lawson couldn't move him. Danny couldn't push him. They were stuck. CO2 rising, oxygen dropping, breathing harder, heartbeat wild, vision tunneling. Danny's recorded words. The air felt thick like syrup. I was inhaling but not receiving anything. Hernandez gasped a final, broken breath, and went limp. 100% real. When CO2 reaches a certain threshold, unconsciousness is immediate. Danny shouted, Bill, he's out. He's out. Lawson tried harder to drag him, but Hernandez blocked the entire tunnel. No way forward. No way back. Then the flashlight died. Complete darkness. Real tunnel rats describe this moment as, when the world disappears. No sound behaves normally. Your own breathing sounds like it's coming from beside you. Heartbeat feels like it is behind your head. Sweat sounds like movement. Tiny soil shifts feel like footsteps. And the mind starts to collapse long before the tunnels do. Danny said, I thought someone else was in the tunnel with us. Breathing. Watching. This is the exact psychological effect many tunnel rats described. Not supernatural, just sensory deprivation mixed with CO2 poisoning. Lawson whispered, Danny, listen. Danny heard it too. Faint, distant shuffling. From the direction they came. Impossible? No. Could have been. A rat. Loose soil. A draft moving debris. A mental hallucination. Their own shifting weight. Sound bouncing unusually. Or even another soldier outside the tunnel entrance. But in complete blackness, your mind amplifies every hint of danger. Lawson made the hardest decision of his life. We leave him, a rule documented in multiple tunnel rat accounts. If a soldier goes unconscious in a tight passage and blocks the tunnel, others either die with him or leave him. Danny hesitated. We can't leave Miguel. Lawson grabbed his wrist. We die if we stay. He was right. But Danny still cried when he remembered saying, I'm sorry, Miguel. Hernandez was alive. Unconscious, but alive. And they crawled over him, barely squeezing past. This detail is recorded in the VA transcript of Danny's 1979 interview. They continued crawling back in darkness. No lights, low oxygen, heart rates spiking. Danny described it. The air burned. Each breath tasted like metal. Lawson whispered ahead. Stay on my boots. Don't lose contact. Danny kept a hand on his heel. But after a few minutes, he lost it. The heel disappeared. Danny whispered, Bill? No answer. He crawled faster, hands scraping the walls, chest tight, ears ringing, darkness spinning. Bill! Bill, say something. Bill! Nothing. Danny was alone. He felt the tunnel sloping upward, but he wasn't sure. CO2 poisoning causes direction confusion. You can't tell if you're going up or down, left or right. Then he heard it. Faint, desperate gasp, echoing somewhere ahead. A single attempt to breathe, then silence. Danny said, It was Lawson. He went first. At this point, Danny's memory fragments. Exactly what happens during hypoxia. He remembers crawling, blackness swallowing vision, tunnel walls shaking slightly. Then, he remembers nothing. He woke up outside, lying beside the tunnel entrance. Vomit on his uniform, airbag mask on his face, medics around him. He survived. Lawson did not. Hernandez was never recovered. In the official report, the rescue team reached the tunnel entrance around 11 minutes after radio silence from Lawson's patrol. They found half the radio antenna sticking out of the entrance. Faint disturbances in the soil. 0 voices, 0 movement. The rescue leader, Lieutenant Parker, reported, We called their names several times. There was no response, only the feeling that the tunnel was breathing hot air out. The air coming out was heavy and warm, a clear sign of stagnant CO2. Only 2 men were allowed to attempt entry with oxygen rebreathers. They crawled in. 3 meters, 7 meters, 10 meters. They found Danny first, unconscious, face down in the mud, barely breathing. His fingernails were embedded in the dirt, a sign he had kept crawling until he passed out. A medic later wrote, He displayed the classic signs of hypoxia and CO2 poisoning. Gasping reflex, muscle tremors, confusion. Danny was dragged out and immediately given oxygen. He survived because he happened to collapse near enough to the entrance for rescue. But the rescue team kept going inside, deeper into the black. They found Sergeant William Bill Lawson, another 8 to 9 meters deeper inside, lying on his side. He had not been killed by the enemy, not stabbed, not shot, not injured. He simply suffocated. His body position indicated that he attempted to crawl back and collapsed mid-movement. Rescuers noted something chilling in the report. His fingernails left drag marks in the hard-packed tunnel soil. He had been trying to move even in his final seconds. His face showed no expression of fear, just fatigue and stillness. This is consistent with loss of consciousness due to CO2. No panic, no thrashing, no dramatic moment, just lights out. This is how tunnel rats really died. Quietly, in the dark, in silence. Miguel Hernandez, the first to go unconscious, was farther in beyond Lawson. The rescue team pushed in, but the tunnel grew dangerously unstable. Soil kept falling in loose clumps. Humidity rose. Temperature climbed. One rescuer wrote, "My glasses fogged beneath the mask." The heat and pressure made the wood beams groan continuously. There is a final note in the search log. Deeper passage inaccessible due to collapse risk. Hernandez presumed deceased from CO2 exposure. Miguel's body was never recovered. This is common in tunnel warfare. Some soldiers simply vanished inside, and the tunnels later collapsed or were destroyed by airstrikes. Hernandez's name is one of many on the wall, dedicated to tunnel warfare casualties. Danny never forgave himself for climbing over him to escape. When Danny regained consciousness, he was on a stretcher near the tree-line. His first words, recorded by the medic, "Where's Bill? Where's Miguel?" A medic put a hand on his shoulder. "Danny, you made it out." Lawson didn't. Danny shook his head weakly. No, he was right in front of me." Then he whispered the words that appear in the declassified interview. Notes, "I heard him breathe. He was alive." A medic replied softly, "That wasn't him, son. That was you. You were hearing your own breathing echo in the tunnel." This phenomenon, where a soldier mistakes his own breath, heartbeat, or movement as someone else's, is a well-recorded psychological effect in extreme low-oxygen darkness. Danny looked toward the tunnel entrance. The wind blew warm soil smell across his face. He whispered, "We should have gone back for Miguel." Lieutenant Parker said, "If you had stayed 5 more minutes, you'd all be dead." The U.S. Army released the incident as 3-man patrol suffered severe CO2 exposure inside an enemy tunnel. Cause of death for Lawson, asphyxiation due to oxygen depletion. Cause of disappearance for Hernandez, likely succumbed to CO2 before collapse sealed lower tunnel section. Cause of survival for Danny, collapsed near breathable zone, was extracted in time. No mention of strange echoes, tunnel groans, the tapping sounds, the sensations of being watched, because those details weren't militarily relevant. They were simply noted as effects of hypoxia, stress, sensory distortion. But Danny knew the truth. What happened inside wasn't supernatural, but it was horrifying in a way only real places can be. Danny returned home, but he wasn't the same. He developed claustrophobia, recurring nightmares, hyper-awareness of small sounds, a fear of enclosed spaces, survivor's guilt. In the late 1970s, Danny gave a voluntary interview to a military trauma researcher. He cried through most of it. He said, "I can't go into basements. I can't ride elevators. I can't sleep without a light." When asked about the tunnel, he said, "It wasn't the darkness. It wasn't the enemy. It wasn't even death. It was the silence. The silence felt alive." Again, these were not hallucinations or imaginations. This is the real psychological toll of tunnel warfare. In 1996, Danny gave one last recorded interview. He was older, his voice slower, hands trembling. The interviewer asked, "Do you ever think about returning to Vietnam?" Danny answered, "No." He paused, then added, "Part of me never left that tunnel." When you spend even 10 minutes in a place where air has weight, where the earth presses on you, where sound becomes another enemy, you leave a piece of yourself behind. The interviewer asked, "What was the most frightening part for you?" Danny didn't hesitate. His answer is the final line in the transcript. "The tunnel didn't kill Bill and Miguel. The air did. The air turned against us. And once the air goes bad, there's no weapon, no courage, no training that can save you."